Let me show you something worth noticing. There's a pattern that shows up in people's bank accounts that almost nobody talks about openly. You get a raise, maybe a decent one, 10 or 15%. You feel good about it for a week, maybe two. Then a few months pass, and somehow you're back to the same feeling you had before the raise. Not broke exactly, but not comfortable either. The money comes in, and the money goes out, and the gap between them hasn't really changed. You start to wonder if you imagined the raise at all. But you didn't. The number went up. The direct deposit is bigger. It's just that the feeling of tightness came back anyway, like water finding its level. And if you're honest with yourself, you can't quite explain where the extra money went. It's not like you bought a car or took a big trip. It just sort of dissolved into your life. Here's what actually happens. And it happens so gradually that most people don't notice it until years later. When your income increases, your mind doesn't treat the new amount as extra. It treats it as the new normal. And once something becomes normal, your sense of what's reasonable shifts to match it. That shift is so smooth, so automatic, that it feels like nothing changed at all. But everything changed. Before the raise, you had a certain set of things you considered acceptable, a certain grocery budget, a certain type of restaurant, a certain threshold for what counts as too expensive. Those boundaries weren't written down anywhere. They were just feelings, instincts about what fit your life. Then your income goes up, and those boundaries start to move. Not all at once, not consciously, but they move. Maybe you start picking up the nicer coffee beans instead of the regular ones. Maybe you stop checking the price on the wine you grab. Maybe you upgrade your internet plan or your phone plan, or you add another streaming service. None of these decisions feel significant in the moment. Each one is small, defensible, reasonable. And that's the problem. They're so reasonable that you don't even register them as decisions. You're just living your life, making normal choices, and the choices quietly adjust to the income you now have. What you're experiencing is the recalibration of baseline expectations. Your mind is constantly updating what it considers standard, and it does this by watching what you actually do, not what you say you value. Every time you make a purchase, you're casting a quiet vote for what your new normal should be. And once enough votes are in, the baseline shifts. The things that used to feel like luxuries stop feeling that way. They just feel like your life. This wouldn't matter much if it only affected a few small purchases. But it doesn't stop there. The recalibration spreads. Once your everyday spending rises to match your income, your sense of what you need in other areas starts to adjust too. You notice your furniture more. Your car feels older. Your apartment feels smaller. Not because anything actually changed about those things, but because your frame of reference changed. You're now comparing your current situation not to where you were 2 years ago, but to where people at your new income level typically are. And the strangest part is, this doesn't feel like lifestyle inflation. It doesn't even feel like a choice. It feels like clarity. Like you're finally seeing your life accurately, noticing the things that were always subpar, but you were too stretched to deal with before. You're not being extravagant. You're just addressing what actually needs attention, except the list of what needs attention keeps growing, and it grows in perfect proportion to your income. There's a specific moment when this becomes visible, and it's usually when something unexpected happens. A medical bill, a car repair, something that requires a few $100s you weren't planning to spend, and you feel that old tightness again, that clench in your chest, that says you're cutting it close, but you're making more money than you ever have. So why does this still feel the same as it did when you were making 40% less? Because the margin didn't grow. The income grew, but the gap between what comes in and what goes out stayed roughly the same. Your spending rose in the background, not through big visible purchases, but through 1,000 small recalibrations. And now, you're in a strange position where you have more money and less flexibility at the same time. This is where people start to feel something close to betrayal. You did the thing you were supposed to do. You advanced. You earned more. You're objectively better off. But the financial pressure didn't ease. And worse, you can't quite explain why. You're not living extravagantly. You're not being reckless. You're just living. But somehow, the math isn't working the way you thought it would. What's missing is the recognition that comfort isn't a dollar amount. It's a gap. And the gap doesn't widen automatically when your income increases. It only widens if you actively hold your baseline still while your income moves. And holding your baseline still feels to most people like deprivation. It feels like refusing to live at the level you've earned, which is why almost nobody does it. There's a deeper tension here that's worth sitting with. If you keep your spending flat while your income rises, you create margin. You create space. You can absorb shocks, make different choices, take some risk. But doing that means living below what your income says is appropriate. And living below what feels appropriate creates a low-grade discomfort that's hard to name. It's not about the stuff itself. It's about the signal, about what your choices say about where you are and who you're becoming. So most people don't create the gap. They let their spending drift upward, and they tell themselves it's fine because they're still saving something, still contributing to retirement, still being responsible. And they are. But the feeling of tightness doesn't go away because the structure didn't change. They're just playing the same game at a higher stake level. And here's the part that really compounds over time. Once your baseline resets, it's very difficult to move it back down. The things that used to feel like upgrades now feel like necessities. The margin you thought you'd have at this income level doesn't exist because you're not comparing your life to your old income. You're comparing it to your current one, and at your current income, you're just getting by. Again, there are people who step off this path, but it usually requires something external, a job loss, a move, some kind of reset that forces them to live on less. And what they discover, almost universally, is that the downgrade isn't as painful as they thought it would be. The things they thought were necessities turn out to be just preferences. Strong preferences, maybe, but not essential. And the relief of having margin again, of not feeling tight every month, outweighs the loss of the small upgrades they've gotten used to. But most people never get that reset. They just keep riding the escalator, income rising, baseline rising, margin staying flat. And they wonder why the financial freedom they thought was coming never quite arrives. It's not because they're bad with money. It's because they're letting their sense of normal adjust in real time. And once it adjusts, it's invisible. It just feels like life. The way out isn't dramatic. It's not about cutting everything or living like you're broke. It's about noticing the recalibration while it's happening, seeing the moment when the nicer coffee stops being a treat and starts being standard, and then deciding consciously whether you want that shift to stick. Not judging it, not fighting it, just seeing it. Because the tightness you feel isn't about the money itself. It's about the gap. And the gap is the only thing that actually gives you room to breathe. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.